A very good evening to you. Welcome to another edition of News Maker Live right here on DBS Television with me, Timothy Polion. We go up until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we'll be concluding with the clip that peaked, and you really do not want to miss that. As always, we're discussing a very important issue, one issue of national importance to us, on the cusp of developments taking place on the island, and whether we are truly ready to take advantage of those developments, in particular when it comes to the education system. In St. Lucia and the OECS, we are spending about over 17% of our national budget in education, and between 5 and 7% of GDP. But to what extent are we reaping the rewards of that investment? We have an individual who is well placed to discuss that issue, along with, for example, whether we need new pedagogical approaches to education. And with CXC exams results out, the new school term, the new school year starting in September, and a range of challenges, we are certainly getting the opportunity to raise those issues, and you'll be getting the opportunity as well to call in when we open the line so that you could pose your questions to the island's education minister. She's also the Minister for Innovation, Gender Relations and Sustainable Development, Dr. Gail Rigobert, who is also the MP for Micoud North. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tim.
Everybody comes into government with, hopefully, a big plan, a big idea. And considering your comments before the 2016 general election with regard to education as a shadow minister then, I'm sure that you hopefully would have an idea as to where you want to take St. Lucia with regard to the education system. What's the big idea from you, Madam Minister?
Thank you, Tim, and thanks for the question. Thank you for having me. As you have rightly indicated, every administration comes in with a big plan. But the extent to which one can implement that plan is contingent on where one finds the system at any given time. And whereas I don't think it would do us much good to necessarily harp upon the shortcomings or the weaknesses, I think it is important to assess where we are at now and how much more work we need to do to get to where we need to be. You have rightfully indicated that the private and public sectors have both lamented for a very long time the mismatch between that which is done in education and that which the labor market requires. And it is for this reason we have recently signed a loan with the Caribbean Development Bank with a view to doing several things. One, addressing the deterioration of schools. We've heard a lot about that. Two, assessing whether universal secondary school education has served its purpose or continues to serve its purpose, and what adjustments need to be made given that that system was implemented well over a decade ago. Thirdly, we well understand that we are operating within a knowledge economy. And can we say with any degree of confidence that the current system adequately prepares St. Lucian students to function in a knowledge economy, an e-economy, or a digital economy? And of course, given that as per the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, we are called upon to ensure that no child is left behind. And we take that to heart to mean that every child, regardless of his or her economic circumstance, regardless of his or her physical or mental ability, will be afforded the opportunity to have the best education that he or she can have. In that regard, therefore, Tim, the ministry is focused on ensuring that there is a paradigmatic shift in what we do. We have to admit that in 2017, the blackboard and the chalk cannot be the order of the day. And in fact, I have long agitated that whereas we recognize what the new information communication technologies can do for us, to equip our students with an artifact or a tool of telecommunication is not in and of itself sufficient to, one, bridge the digital divide, two, adequately equip our students with computer skills or digital skills, and that in fact, what we need to have is a marrying of that tool or equipment with a robust program to ensure that that student is exposed to a program of study that will lead to the enhancement of skills.
Madam Minister, do you know where to start? Because you have told me a lot. You've given me a lot to chew on and the viewers a lot to chew on. But as in everything, and every grand idea, you must know where you are starting.
I'll tell you that one of the things that continues to worry us very profoundly is the area of teacher training. Whether we have, in effect, a system that adequately prepares our teachers to deliver to children of the 21st century. And that is why what we call the EQUIP program, which seeks to enhance what we do in the education sector, has a significant training component. Part of that training also includes what we have already started to do in partnership with the Organization of American States and Commonwealth of Learning, and that is to equip teachers already in the system with adequate skills so that they can deliver through ICTs or using modern technology. It is not equivalent to taking an IT course or elective. It is the integration of the holistic infusion of the technology in the new pedagogy. Further, we recognize that smart schools are the order of the day. What do we mean by a smart school? A smart school means that it is climate smart, it is resilient, it is infrastructurally sound. For example, in our part of the world where climate change is an important concern, that we have to, and also that many of the schools serve as emergency shelters. We need to ensure the infrastructural integrity of schools so that they can withstand the vagaries of the weather. We also need to ensure that they are energy efficient. And that is why you would have heard that we are and have been and continue to outfit some of the schools with appropriate technology such that we can realize some savings, for example, with respect to our electricity bill. So whether it be LED lighting, for example. We also recognize that many of our students, albeit that they have the cognitive ability, do not have the economic wherewithal to access tertiary education. And that is why we are in the process of embarking upon an initiative which we have very simply called the hashtag Educate St. Lucia initiative. What do we mean by that? We mean, one, that we will debunk the notion that education can only be had between the ages of, let's say, for argument's sake, between 5 and 16, within 4 hallowed walls with a teacher, a board, and a stick of chalk. That in effect, we are promoting lifelong learning, we are promoting what we call second chances, and of course, to ensure that students, notwithstanding their economic background, can be afforded greater opportunity.
In the St. Lucia environment, St. Lucia landscape, how much focus and appreciation and respect is being given, you think, to teachers and to learning in general? I mean, you visit countries like, let's say, the United States, and you go through so many learning centers in parts of that great country. In St. Lucia, you come across a lot of areas where a lot of centers are used for entertainment. You have a situation where, for example, just recently somebody in the US, a grandmother in the 90s, graduated from school, high school, and so on. As a people, how much of a focus and attention do we give to education?
Wow, Tim, that's a very profound question. I recall remarking at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College graduation last year, that there is an underlying discomfort with excellence in our country. That notwithstanding, we all want our kids to go to the top secondary schools or elite schools, that there is some inexplicable ambiguity when it comes to dealing with people of intellectual ability or some kind of outstanding ability. And that is unfortunate, because what that means is that those children who are really gifted sometimes feel considerable pressure to dumb down so that they can fit in. And that is why I have always argued that our system for very long has catered to the fat middle, the norm. If a child is superlatively intelligent, extraordinarily intelligent, I don't know that we make sufficient accommodation for someone like that. Similarly, if a child finds him or herself at the other end of the spectrum, where that child has some kind of physical disability or learning disability, we also find ourselves lacking in that respect. It is for this reason that we are engaging with the private sector to ensure that on the East Coast, for example, we can expand opportunity for students with learning disabilities. The center in Denver is woefully overcrowded and inadequate. And in that same vein too, we are also embarking upon establishing centers of excellence, such that we can correct the perceived universality of the secondary school curriculum and offer greater diversity or choice to students who perhaps are gifted in the sports or in the arts, as we call these generally.
In that vein, is there therefore the need for us to look at what's happening in Finland? Because it was earlier this week, I read a piece in the Jamaica Gleaner newspaper, and I'm reading that it says, Finnish teachers differentiate their teaching to respond to the learning needs of each student. Elementary school teachers are not alone, but supported by other specialists, example, special education teachers, psychologists, and the school leadership team in deciding what kind of support a student might require. This is also discussed and agreed with the students' parents. Do we need a paradigm shift in dealing with, for example, children who have special needs and children who are gifted?
Permit me, Tim, to applaud the work of those teachers who have devoted considerable effort, time, and talent in the special needs education subsector. We've got a lovely gentleman in the name of Mr. Saint-Gis who oversees that area. And as I move around the country and interact with those teachers, I can appreciate their challenges. I recognize too, therefore, that we need to employ more effort in ensuring that these teachers are exposed to greater opportunities for training. In fact, last year when I attended the Peace Corps induction ceremony, I asked of them, please, whether they could consider special education as an area of focus in recruiting Peace Corps volunteers to come to St. Lucia, because we recognize there is a real need. I also want to say that we always like to refer to Finland and the education system there. It serves as a healthy benchmark. But we've got to acknowledge that there are several challenges that our teachers face. And let me be very, very clear about this, Tim. Our teachers go well beyond their call of duty. They make extraordinary sacrifice. I don't know that we can nearly begin to compensate them for the effort that they put into what they do. Having said all of that, it remains to be seen how best we can utilize the 75% of the education budget that goes into emoluments and wages, which is salaries and wages. So people love to refer to the budget that education gets, not realizing that much of it really just goes into salaries and wages. How then can we begin to imagine becoming a Finland? How then can we begin to orchestrate the revolution in education? How then can we begin to introduce e-education as a real, tangible, reachable goal? How then can we ensure that our students are afforded a greater opportunity to access tertiary education. What do we do with Sir Arthur Lewis? Sir Arthur Lewis? Every year we afford Sir Arthur Lewis a total amount of $15 million. And the question must be asked, for how much longer can we sustain Sir Arthur Lewis in that regard? Is it not incumbent upon Sir Arthur Lewis at this time to seek out private partners? At the end of the day, we must recognize that while the government has subsidized Sir Arthur quite heavily, perhaps given our own fiscal constraints, there is time to be innovative and creative and to seek out lucrative partners so that we can do the kind of work that is necessary to turn a Sir Arthur Lewis around.
But how can this be done without passing on the cost to the parents of those students?
That is a
because they themselves are already making the contribution either directly or indirectly.
That is the challenge. So, for example, you would have heard in times past that there were efforts to raise the tuition fee at Sir Arthur Lewis. And I can tell you, within the last 2 weeks, I received a similar letter asking that permission be given to Sir Arthur Lewis to raise the tuition fees, which I said no to. Why no? Not no because I do not appreciate the economic challenge that confronts Sir Arthur Lewis, but no, one, because I don't think that there has been sufficient engagement with all stakeholders, especially parents. Is there not another avenue for raising revenue to meet the increasing cost of running the college without necessarily having to pass that on to the parent? And so we need to adopt a more business-like, investment-type approach versus treating this as if it were easy to adjust a fee and simply ask parents to seek out the additional monies to make up the gap. And I feel very strongly about this, that if it is we are to consider the raising of fees, that it would be more than a mention or passing mention, that there would be active, in-depth engagement with all stakeholders so that parents and guardians can prepare themselves to meet that cost. So I want to put the country on notice. We really do have to revisit Sir Arthur Lewis Community College fees. The fee structure does not adequately reflect the kinds of costs associated with delivering the program at Sir Arthur Lewis. But for that to happen, I think the college needs to do a better job of sharing with the public what its goals are, what its challenges are, and why the fee increase may be necessary. We may know that in passing, but there's a difference if it is you're about to invest in your child's education and you need to glean a better understanding of why it is you're being asked to pay more.
With the current fee structure, Madam Minister, I get the impression that there's great dissatisfaction on the part of the students. And as the host of Newspin on RC, I receive email from time to time from the students, from the parents, complaining about the quality of education being provided to the students. So what guarantee do we have that if the fees are increased, that commensurately there'll be an improvement? Several years ago, maybe over a decade, consumers in St. Lucia were asked to pay a lot more for water. Water rates were increased by 100% on the basis that potable, the commodity would be, the quality would be improved, and also its availability would be something that people would be proud of as well. And they have not delivered on those two areas.
That is precisely, Tim, why I said no to the increase of fees for the academic year 2017-2018, because it is precisely that the public wants to know. What is the product offering? Is it internationally comparable? Is it competitive? Are we satisfied that we are producing the best students or great students? And if parents were asked to pay additional monies for fees, are they satisfied that they are getting value for money? I must say that history will show that Sir Arthur Lewis has done a phenomenal job in our society. But as with everything else in life, there is room for improvement. And that is why I've asked of them not to increase the fees this academic year, but to use the time between now and next August to sensitize the public, to educate the public. You and I know that Sir Arthur Lewis has had a whole host of consultancies done as to what to do with it next. And that is why I've said to my team, perhaps what we need to do is to grab all those reports and start to read them from the back, because we already know what is contained in there. I don't think that anybody will diagnose Sir Arthur any differently than it was 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years ago. So why don't we get into action mode and do what is necessary? But for that to happen, the society has to be sufficiently convinced that Sir Arthur Lewis is a stellar institution, is delivering a valuable service to our society, and is fit for purpose in the 21st century.
When we say that our people are a precious resource, are we really living up to this when we want to increase the cost of education to our young people?
I beg of us, Tim, not to think of it simply as an increase of cost, and that is why the conversation is important. We are being asked perhaps to consider making a greater investment. And I like to think of education as an investment, because what you get out of it in the long run is so much more than what your dollar investment initially. And what we need to ascertain is the public sufficiently satisfied that that is the case with respect to Sir Arthur Lewis? A program of studies offered by Sir Arthur Lewis, which for years has been heavily subsidized. The parents aren't paying anything close to the market value of the courses that, or the products that they receive, or the services that they receive. And that is why that conversation is important. You know, Tim, when you ask people to pay for something, they may very well be willing to pay and pay more if they're satisfied with the product or service.
What about people who cannot pay? And when Sir Arthur Lewis, our Nobel laureate, who said that the way out of poverty is through education.
It is
so
for that.
If you have the aptitude for learning and you don't have the money at all, what are we saying to those people?
We have a healthy bursary system within the Ministry of Education where we offer scholarships or bursaries to students who come from economically deprived households. I know that there is also a similar initiative which is done through the SSDF, and all of that in an effort to ensure that students who come from economically challenged households are afforded that opportunity. In fact, we're taking it one step further. We've got a hashtag First Generation Initiative, and that initiative is centered around the notion that students who come from families where no one has had the privilege of going to college or university will be given the relevant necessary assistance, for example, to write an ACT exam, which then gains them access to a US college. And conversations are ongoing with respect to articulation agreements, which mean that the government of St. Lucia enters into arrangement or agreement with universities such that we can agree that students who perform really well on the ACT, for example, have a nearly guaranteed place at the university, whether it be full or partial scholarship, depending on how they've performed. So in the coming weeks, we will be launching that, all in an effort, of course, to ensure that kids with talent are given opportunity. Further, we are also following up on very healthy conversations we've had with the diplomatic corps, that is those countries with diplomatic presence here in St. Lucia, that historically they've always been very generous and benevolent, but in the recent months I've had the opportunity to share with the diplomatic corps the vision of the ministry such that their gifts can more closely match or be aligned with our vision for the sector. And I must say that in that regard we've been able to tweak some of the scholarship offerings such that they are more closely aligned to our needs.
Why you decided or agreed to serve as the island's Minister of Education? Because I think for some people it came as a shock. Because of your training and your background, many people were expecting you to be the island's External Affairs Minister.
Really? My Prime Minister thought I'd be bored because I know external relations or international relations too well, I suppose. But I'm just being flippant or facetious. My good Prime Minister thought that perhaps I was the one for the job. I was just as surprised as many others, and we had a healthy discussion about it, and I felt particularly honored because, as you know, the entire nation stands on the shoulders of the education sector. It is no easy ministry in so far as it touches every household. Our future depends on it. Every other sector depends on it. And that is why it is so important to us that we correct what is perceived as a mismatch, and that mismatch being the gap between what we do and what the market requires. And I really want to thank my principals and the management of the ministry for being open to new ways of thinking about things, new ways of doing things. We just had a very healthy discussion over the last couple of weeks about college readiness, work readiness, career readiness, because whereas we can expose students to some core competencies and technical skills, there is all of this discussion regarding the importance of soft skills or non-cognitive skills, and that is good manners, hospitality, problem solving, teamwork, conflict resolution, and all of these things, which are terribly important. And you will again in the coming weeks learn of some more aggressive programs in that regard. I want to applaud the work being done by the NSDC, which also falls within my remit, which can easily be classified as a second chance program, or offering second chance programs or lifelong learning opportunities. And in there is a component that focuses on soft skills as well, in collaboration with our Technical, Vocational and Education Training Unit, our TVET unit. So we recognize that certainly what we need to do is to tilt the system. A friend of mine said to me recently, I need to sukwe the sector. I need a good sukwe. I won't call your name, Doc. But a lecturer, colleague from South has said to me, you need to shake the system. And we're prepared to do that, but we can only do that in collaboration with the other agencies. And I really want to ask other agencies to work with us. This is not a standalone sector. It is the bedrock of our society, and it calls for everyone to step up to the plate and to be big about it and to be clinical about it. I've always said that when we recognize a gap, a shortcoming or failing, it's easy as a politician, for example, to say, oh, I inherited this and it was a royal mess. We all know that. That's why the last administration lost. If they were doing a fantastic job, then they would still be there. So there's no need to rehash that. The more important thing is, what do you do moving on? Now that you've inherited this, how do you fix it? And that is the challenge. That is the challenge. And the programs that I have outlined are all in an effort to ensure that we can improve upon what we inherited.
You're watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. My guest this evening, Education Minister Dr. Gail Rigobert. When we come back, we'll be focusing on an issue in the education system which surfaced there about a fortnight ago. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. Once again, my guest this evening is Dr. Gail Rigobert, Minister with responsibility for education, innovation, gender relations, and sustainable development. Offshore Medical School, that is well touted, and several years ago, St. Lucia would have been in competition with Dominica and Grenada and so on. But that has its fair share of challenges as well, as was the case about a fortnight ago. What is being done to revamp or reform, if necessary, the offshore medical school in St. Lucia, or school system or sector in St. Lucia?
Thank you for that opportunity, Tim. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Let me say very clearly that the ministry takes very seriously its responsibility in ensuring that offshore educational institutions operating here in St. Lucia are held to observe, to meet certain international benchmarks and standards. So whether it be medical schools, theology school, or any university that offers a suite of programs, the expectation is that these schools do offer programs that are internationally comparable and can withstand rigor, interrogation, scrutiny, questioning, etc. The situation with the medical schools is rather unfortunate. It is unfortunate because it is an issue that long preceded this administration. It is an issue that has several dimensions to it. One, from the Ministry of Education's perspective, we need to ensure that all schools operating here are registered and have a permit to operate. For that to be had, the ministry must undertake an inspection of the facility and some review of the curriculum. When that is done and the committee is satisfied that that school does meet certain requirements, then registration and permits are allowed or awarded.
Which committee is that?
In the case of medical schools, we work in conjunction with the Medical and Dental Council. If, for example, it is a technical vocational school, we may call upon our technical vocational education training unit. So it depends on the subject offering, but generally it would involve the relevant stakeholders in collaboration with the Ministry of Education to ensure that that school does meet certain standards before we can issue a permit.
As we speak here tonight, all those schools have gone through that kind of scrutiny, all the offshore schools operating in St. Lucia?
Yes, we have corrected that in the last couple of months. I can tell you, when we came in, they did not all meet the legal requirements to be registered and to have a permit. We have since ensured that all offshore medical schools, and we are looking at some of the other offshore tertiary institutions as well, because while the conversation has been in the main about medical schools, we have to remember that there are other tertiary institutions here as well that are required in the main to go through a process of securing registration and permit to operate.
Why have those regulations in place and then to basically ignore them?
That is rather unfortunate that for one reason or another, they were not observed as the law or regulations required. Notwithstanding, we have since ensured that we have brought those schools into alignment with respect to the requirement for registration and award of permits.
Is it the case that we're competing so fiercely with the other islands that we are foregoing those particular issues?
We should not, and I remain adamant that in the interest of the reputation of St. Lucia, in the interest of promoting St. Lucia as a services economy or a service economy or service-oriented economy, we have to ensure that whatever it is that we do meets with or satisfies whatever scrutiny we are subjected to. With respect to medical schools in particular, it is regrettable, and I have said so to them, I have said so to the other stakeholders. It is regrettable that it took a letter of April 2017 from an overseas entity to provoke that kind of reaction and to ensure that the medical schools really did meet the various regulations. Having said that, I must say that whereas those entities were led to believe that they could continue to pursue accreditation from now through to 2023, I think it was, that the slapping of the sudden date of January 2018 is what posed a significant challenge. Because as we understand the accreditation process, if they were lucky at all to go through the process as efficiently as the system allows, that is accreditation through the CAMHP, which is the regionally recognized accreditation body for medical schools. Normally, that is an 18-month to 2-year process. I have engaged CAMHP, I have engaged other stakeholders such that, or with a view to buying time and saying, can we make that process more efficient? We have medical schools here who have expressed a willingness to aspire for and have started the accreditation process. And the most I can assure them at this time is that within the next couple months, there will be site visits from CAMHP. By that time, Tim, many of the students who are reading about those medical schools who do not have accreditation, they become anxious, and understandably so. So do those students take a gamble and say, well, I'm reasonably satisfied that the school that I attend appears to be kosher, has been doing things the right way, and is likely to secure accreditation from CAMHP by the time I am ready to write my final exam? Or is it that that student waits out or pulls out and says, well, why don't you get the accreditation first and then? But the accreditation issue comes into play because it has become a requirement for licensing to practice here. In other words, whereas the Ministry of Education is responsible for the registration and awarding of permits to educational institutions to function and to operate and to award degrees or certificates, it is the Medical and Dental Council that offers a license to practice as a nurse, as a doctor, as a medical practitioner. And we have to understand that division of labor. I must say we benefit from healthy relationships with all our stakeholders, and the Medical Council has been working very closely with us. I must say that in the last 24 hours, I had every hope and ambition that we could resolve this. And the resolution to be had hovers around maybe 3 options. 1, do we establish a National Accreditation Council that is given the power to accredit medical institutions, and then ask of the Medical and Dental Council to adjust the protocols to allow for graduates from colleges that have secured that national accreditation to be licensed to practice in St. Lucia? That's 1. Do we ask of the Medical and Dental Council and other stakeholders to give due consideration to allowing the graduates of institutions here to write a CAMC, which is a Caribbean-based medical exam, and upon successful completion of these exams, then become eligible for licensure to practice in St. Lucia? Or do we continue along with the CAMHP requirement, which we know historically takes 18 months to 2 years, by which time there will be no offshore medical education sector in St. Lucia? Because by that time, One, whatever paperwork which the medical schools have tabled with CAMHP, when the site visit is done, whether it be with respect to number of students, whether it be with the quality of the academic staff and the personalities themselves, by then these people would have fled. And that is the concern. So can we agree as a country, and I want to be very, very clear, I am not in the least suggesting that we should adjust or dumb down our standards. I am not saying that. I am saying, yes, we uphold the standards such that we expect of those medical schools that they offer a program that can withstand scrutiny and is internationally comparable. But can we consider revising, adjusting the requirement that it is students from accredited medical colleges and accredited only by CAMHP? That is the catch. That is, it is only these medical schools, only the medical schools that are accredited by CAMHP that will be afforded, only those students will be afforded the licensure to practice as a medical practitioner. You know, Tim, we have exerted significant effort to resolve this, and that is why I can say to you the registration and awarding of permits, when we came in, that was not kosher. We've corrected that. We've fast-tracked the registration process such that we get the teams out there to visit the schools and ensure that the oversight and surveillance can be done in good time so that the schools can secure registration and their permits. We've done that. That is within my remit. What is not within my remit, which I then have to lobby and work along with our sister agencies and stakeholders, is to adjust the protocols such that in the short term, and I had very, very healthy discussions with the Medical and Dental Council, and I said the last meeting when we were reviewing what legal avenues do we have to fix this, albeit while we anticipate and wait for CAMHP accreditation. Is there a facilitation? Is there some kind of accommodation that can be made such that the students who have already registered can continue? And to my mind, and given the conversations we've had with all of the stakeholders, it is for the Minister of Health and the Medical Council at this time to continue to dialogue with us to ensure that we can adjust that provision. And if we are to save the sector, as far as I can see, that is the only fix. And I want to be clear that at least it buys us 2 years, during which time all the medical schools here continue to aspire to secure CAMHP accreditation. What is happening to our students, and some of who are St. Lucians, Tim? This is rather unfortunate. My heart bleeds for them. I regret that other administrations did not assume the posture that we have, to the extent that we're saying, please, let's do this right so that the US market does not disqualify our graduates, so that the Canadian market does not disqualify our graduates, so that the English market does not disqualify our graduates. We want that when someone graduates from here, after a parent has made that kind of investment, that that child, that graduate can practice in any market and do a sterling job of it.
What will happen to students who have already graduated over several years? Will the issue be revisited?
No, it's not retroactive. The issue does not have that historical resonance. We are dealing with students who are in train and will be leaving within the next couple of months in particular.
But going forward, how do you expect this to affect the sector? Because that is a sector that some islands in the Caribbean are looking forward to taking advantage of, and especially with students coming in from faraway destinations. You have the boarding and lodging and everything of that nature contributing to our GDP.
There's a silver lining, and I'll tell you what it is. You must have read the account of the student who detailed her experience, her investment, and now she's in abeyance. And again, I grieve for her. But guess what? What we are doing is precisely to bar those kinds of things from happening again. And in fact, beginning now, effective immediately, any medical school setting up shop in St. Lucia must first secure initial provisional accreditation. So you can't begin to open your doors if you don't have that. So that then at least serves to deter or prevent such things happening, such that students who are registering into the program already have some degree of confidence that the program that they've been put through is kosher. It is regrettable that the medical schools have to go through that. I know, IAU is this close. MU is this close. Spartans has it for another year or so, and will, because by the way, it expires too, huh? A lot of people think it's not something you get for life. You have to show continually, or periodically, I think it's 3 years or so, that you have maintained the standards. And that's really good for our markets when we can ensure, and I really want to applaud the wise counsel coming from our sister partner in the entity of the Medical and Dental Council. They have really given us sterling technical advice, but the juncture at which we find ourselves now is simply to ask that we give some consideration to tweaking the existing protocol, because we are sufficiently satisfied with the academic rigor that is embedded in the CAMC exam. It is not a PASH exam, it's not a PAPI show exam. For you to pass that, you have to be pretty sound and know your stuff. And so we are sufficiently satisfied, the other Caribbean countries use it, that you pass, as long as you can pass that exam, then that should serve as sufficient proof that you have some basic competency or sufficient competency to practice as a medical practitioner. And that is where we at, Tim. And I'm confident because we've had very open, healthy dialogue, and I know that we can get to that point. Because I'm telling you, what a lot of people miss, apart from my responsibility within the Ministry of Education, our responsibility to ensure that the program is intellectually sound, it's academically rigorous, it is internationally competitive. We also must recognize that there are many other spin-off economic activities that bring millions to our shores. And the potential economic impact of those schools moving cannot be underestimated. In fact, colloquially, because I don't have, or casually, because I don't have the evidence in terms of the data, but there's every reason to suspect that it is really the existence of the medical schools that keep a town like Vieux Fort afloat, for example. We know what impact they have up in Grosley, for example. So you have realtors, car rental services, hoteliers, restaurateurs, people who rely on that sector who are now adversely affected, and largely too because of the misinformation, Tim. There's a lot of misinformation out there. A simple question was asked to the Ministry of Education. Are the graduates of medical schools in St. Lucia eligible for licensure? The protocols as established by the Medical and Dental Council suggest that you need to have graduated from a CAMHP accredited entity. And the ones that we have are in the process of securing that. So the misinformation regarding whether it was the Ministry of Education that shut down the schools, or it was the Ministry of Health, or it was the Prime Minister, I had to defend the Prime Minister. All kinds of imaginations and mischievous pronouncements regarding why we found ourselves here. Let's be blunt. We found ourselves here because somebody allowed somebody to do less than what was required.
Let's take a break. Back in just a moment to continue the discussion. And of course, we'll be taking your calls. You're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS Television. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. Once again, you're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Polion, and my guest is the Minister with responsibility for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations, and Sustainable Development, Dr. Gail Rigobert. Certainly, we don't have sufficient time to focus on all your portfolios, but anything new happening in sustainable development?
There's always something new happening in sustainable development. Actually, today I met with them. Wednesday is the day that I've set aside to sit with them and receive their reports and go through the work progress reports. And I can tell you that we are moving speedily along with the installation of energy-saving lights in schools, for example, and on public buildings, the installation of solar PV units. The geothermal project is about to shift gears in a big way. I have given them the challenge to ensure that when the next generation of students go to SOFRED, that we see more than a little piece of metal jutting out of the ground, which is what you and I saw on the tour back in the 70s and 80s. And I'm satisfied that they are moving at a healthy pace. I know that we had a couple of hurdles recently, but I'm satisfied that we've corrected that. With respect to our renewable energy agenda, I think that we are well on our way. LUSLEC, as you know, recently acquired quite a few acres of land to establish a solar farm, and we continue to work very closely with them. They too had a 50% share in the experimental work taking place in Denner with respect to wind energy, and notwithstanding all the mischievous statements that were made, the government remains committed to seeing that project come to full fruition. The issue was whether it was for the government to foot the bill of acquisition of the land, and that is where there was a variance of opinion. I think now it appears that the environment is ripe for the developer to consider meeting that cost, him or herself, in collaboration with LUSLEC, versus passing that on to the government given our fiscal constraints. So I'm satisfied that the minute it becomes clear to all those involved that while the government is very, very committed to our renewable energy agenda, that our current fiscal position does not allow for us to acquire land for the benefit of any developer to continue on with any exploratory works that are ongoing. And I therefore expect that in the coming weeks and months we will be able to convince those involved that perhaps it makes good sense for them to go that route without necessarily passing that burden on to the government of St. Lucia. We also are very excited about consideration of waste to energy proposals before us. Of course, there's no shortage of speculators coming through our doors because, you know, renewable energy is the new hip and happening thing. But we have to be discerning, and I really want to applaud my technical staff, these guys and girls. These technical officers really do know their work, and I'm ever confident that they give me sound technical advice and they point the government in the right direction. So I'm satisfied that we're doing some good work in there. And of course, you know, all the interventions we're making with respect to climate change adaptability, for example.
Let me put the telephone number on screen right now so that you can call with your questions and comments for my guest. Once again, Dr. Gail Rigobert, Minister for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations and Sustainable Development. We hear a lot about renewable energy, and as you said earlier on, it's a vogue, it's a fad right now. People are talking about it, but we seem not to be doing anything about it to come out with the necessary results so that we are not so dependent on fossil fuel. But anyway, let's take a call.
I beg to differ, though.
Yes. Good evening. This is Newsmaker Live. You're on the air.
Hi, good night.
Good evening to you.
Yes, I just need to tell you, okay, one thing, the first thing, we need a night for each portfolio.
I agree. Yeah.
Education, and we deal with education tonight, and some other time you invite her for some other portfolio.
Okay, ma'am. Agreed.
Okay, now the question I need to ask: what exactly? Where does the buck stop in terms of what's happening with the medical school? Isn't it with education? Shouldn't education take the responsibility and say, yes, we've done some injustice, we fell short, apologize and move on? Because to me, the buck stops with them. They were supposed to monitor. They were supposed to monitor what is going on. And even if you give the medical school a criteria, you as the education ministry or whatever unit is responsible, you're supposed to be monitoring, ensure that they adhere to whatever criteria that you have given them. Because they'll always try to, you know, do little things to combat or not keep up, you know, especially when they Anyway, leave that. I was just saying that, don't you think that the buck stops with education and they should bear the responsibility and just apologize and move on from there?
Thank you so much for calling, ma'am. Appreciate the contribution.
Thank you so very kindly for your question. As I explained a moment ago, Tim, whereas we are responsible for ensuring that the program offered is kosher, is sufficient, is adequate, such that we can issue a license to operate, well, or permit rather, to function or operate as a school offering a service in the tertiary education sector. Whether the graduates of these institutions get to practice medicine, that responsibility falls with the Medical and Dental Council. And that distinction is very important, and it ought to be clear in the minds of our listeners. But we continue to work in very close collaboration because we are one entity, one market, one country, one economy, one vested interest. And so it is important that we all ensure we're on the same page. But I just wanted to explain the division of labor, although we continue to work together.
We have a call. Good evening. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask, what, at this point, what is being done for the students who have actually graduated from such medical schools that are not accredited?
Thank you so much for calling.
That's a very, thank you so very kindly, caller. And I don't think the public knows this. Between April and now, we've had several meetings with the stakeholders, whether it be the owners of the schools, the lecturers of the schools, the management of the schools. What we need to do, and in fact, we had a meeting to that effect yesterday, is to meet with that subsector. What about the students who have graduated recently? What becomes of them? And we are confident that the next step for them, we carry that burden. And like I say, I'm not in the business of attributing blame. So the first caller, I wish she had said so 5, 10, 15 years ago, that we would not have found ourselves in this situation. And I'm adamant I'm not going to pass the problem on to my successor either. We're going to fix it. So here we are. Forget about the history insofar as we know what went wrong. Let us fix it. And that is why we feel a commitment to the students to ensure that we can do some hand-holding and give some guidance. I really want the current students to know that the medical schools operating here, today the 16th of August?
15th.
15th of August, you sure you know the date?
I think today is 16th. Not too sure.
But the medical schools currently operating here
Today is 16th, yeah.
have all began the accreditation, the CAMHP accreditation process. We have worked very closely with them to ensure that they do that which is required. And whereas we were told that the schedule was already packed and St. Lucian medical schools or medical schools operating in St. Lucia may not be considered for site visits, we have reason to believe that we can get at least one site visit in before the end of the year.
We have a call. Good evening. My apologies. Go ahead, please, with your contribution.
Yes,
Sorry.
good evening. We're seeing more and more persons returning from university of training in ICT integration. I just want to know if there's any plan on the ministry's level.
Okay,
I
not too
beg
clear.
your pardon.
It's not too clear at all, caller. Can you repeat?
Yes, more and more we're seeing persons returning from university with training, with certification in ICT integration. So I just wanted to know if the ministry had any plans to integrate such persons into the system to help with that thrust towards creating innovative schools.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Please, we are welcoming those, and also we are training those already in the system with respect to ICT integration. So if you know of anyone out there with those skills, please ask them to come into us. If they're outside of the education system, maybe they've not been integrated into our staffing, we'd love to know that you're out there, and then you can partner with us, become part of us, so that we can continue with our e-education agenda, our ICT integration agenda.
Listen, our attention to another call. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. I would like to ask the Minister, what is the latest concerns AFA as it relates to the conversion to University College?
Thank you so much for calling.
It was supposed to have started this academic year.
Thank you,
Oh,
sir.
really? You got a start date? I don't know that there's a start date with respect
Thank
to
you, sir. Okay.
Sir Arthur Lewis being converted into a university college or university. What I do know is we have a pile this high of consultancies that were done previously. And I have said to the team, I don't necessarily want to see another consultant. We had a gentleman here, Professor Salmi, Dr. Salmi. He did a fantastic job, but guess what? He was staring us in the mirror. We knew exactly what he was going to say. We know what the problems are. We belong to the space, we operate in the space, we function in the space. What we need with Sir Arthur Lewis is the action plan. What do we do now, henceforth, even before we pump lots of money in there? Because there's no point in pumping money into you don't know what. Where is the structure? Where's the business plan? What's the vision? What's the strategic direction of Sir Arthur Lewis? I'm telling you, for many of us, would love to see a national university, but not just in name, as we say.
But the previous United Workers' Party education minister made it seem quite easy that the transformation would not be that difficult. But anyway, I'm referring to Mr. Austin James.
It is not an easy process.
Let's take a call. Good evening to you. This is Newsmaker Live. You on the air? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hi, good evening to you, sir. You're on the air.
I just want to ask Gary Gilbert, Minister of Education, Gary Gilbert, why did they stop the laptop program?
Thanks a lot.
I mean, that was such of a good program for the youngsters, you know. And just recently, I saw giving so many laptops to Tapion, which is a private school, you know. So I wanted to answer that.
Thank you so much for calling, sir.
Thank you, sir. Can I remind our good citizens that Tapion School houses St. Lucian citizens? That the Tapion School is a not-for-profit entity, that it is the citizens of St. Lucia who send their students there in the main. So if there is something to be had from the Ministry of Education, they should not be discriminated. This is not the first time the Ministry of Education has gifted anything to a private school. So I don't know if the students at Tapion are less St. Lucians than, or less St. Lucian than any other St. Lucian students. I thought that was a rather curious debate as to whether or not the Tapion school should have received, given that they have no laptop. So in the same voice
the
that
issue
I'm being told,
the whole question was about affordability.
you know who goes to Tapion? You drive up there. The kids of public servants, teachers, policemen, customs officers. Who do you think goes there? All the kids of oil tycoons? There are the kids of struggling St. Lucians who want a different product for their kids, who want something else, who perhaps for one reason or another. I know of parents whose children have some kind of learning disability and they prefer the Tapion offering because of smaller class sizes, because of the level of attention that perhaps can be afforded to them. It is not necessarily that they're so much more wealthy than or so much wealthier than other St. Lucian students. So that's one thing. I think I have said it several times. I don't know that the Ministry of Education has stopped the laptop program. We can use any number of descriptors. I will tell you what is happening.
I promise you, ma'am,
Review.
we'll return to that issue, but we have a call with someone.
Oh, you do? Oh,
Yes,
I do
we
beg
have
your
another call.
pardon. Sorry.
Good evening, Newsmaker Live. You on the air? Hello.
Yes.
Good evening to you. Quickly, go if you got your contribution.
Well, Timothy, I'm lost. I'm lost there because I thought it was money people, children that went to Tapion. Because when I look back, all my friends were the people that have the money that can send their children to Tapion. So I'm lost.
Okay, thanks a lot. But
So,
let's return to the laptop issue.
So like I said, you can use any descriptor. Review. And why the review? I remain adamant. To equip a child with a laptop in and of itself will not help that child acquire the digital competency, the e-skills that that child requires. That laptop has to be accompanied with a program, a syllabus that will then help to improve upon or build those e-skills. It's easy, and let me tell you, it's an easy political winning. Oh, give them a laptop. Even the very people who implemented the program are aware of the shortcomings. We are ensuring that we have a program, a curriculum, such that those tools, the laptops, can be leveraged, can be utilized.
How soon are you hoping to achieve this?
We have a digital literacy course being launched this year in September.
Okay. I'm told that we have a call.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening to you.
People.
Good evening.
Hello.
I would like to add my little piece here. I do not believe, I do not think, I do not know that we have any such thing in St. Lucia as private students. We are all students. We go to school, we're students. So there's no such thing like public students or public children and public and private
And private,
students. Thank you so much, darling. Good night.
All right, thank you so much for calling. But you know that's a debate that is gaining currency in the United States and elsewhere. Okay, what happens to the private schools? Whether the quality of teaching is different from what obtains in the public schools. Because of the teacher-student ratio might be different and so on.
And that is why I continue to applaud our teachers throughout the system, whether they be in the private or public school sector. I continue to congratulate the extraordinary work that they do.
You have a call. Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you on the air?
Good evening. Hello.
Hi, good evening to you, ma'am. You on the air?
Good evening. I'd just like to speak about the medical school issue.
Go ahead, please.
I listened to your guest,
The
Dr.
minister?
Elizabeth, give a very long explanation about accreditation. And I think that has just confused more than explained anything.
So then, do you have any question?
Yes, I'm trying to get to my question. The thing about it is that, from what I understand, CAM-HB accreditation, the deadline for that is 2023.
Was.
Sorry?
The deadline was.
Was 2023.
Yes.
So
That
what is the
deadline
deadline
changed
now?
in April of 2017. One of the oversight institutions in the United States indicated that for its purposes, graduates from the St. Lucian medical schools, if they are not licensed, or rather asked the question, are the students of the medical schools in St. Lucia licensed to practice in St. Lucia? And that be used as a yardstick as to how to engage them in the American market.
You've lost me there.
Okay, it's very simple, ma'am. To the extent that the protocol or the rules, let's say the rules established by the Medical and Dental Council in collaboration with other stakeholders, of course, I'm sure it was the result of consultation, a collaborative process, indicate that for a graduate of a medical school to practice in St. Lucia, that school where the person studied must be accredited by CAM-HP, which is the regional accrediting body for medical schools. So if you're going to Joe Blow Medical School and Joe Blow Medical School is accredited by CAM-HP, the graduates of that school are eligible for licensure in St. Lucia. That means they can practice medicine in St. Lucia.
Fine, I understand that. But what I'm saying is that the medical schools, the majority of the students were not St. Lucians. So most of these students do not want to remain in St. Lucia to practice. They go back home. So why was it necessary to basically put so much pressure on the school that the school had to leave? I mean, couldn't you have worked with the school to enable them to stay when you consider all the spin-offs that the benefits to the people of Gros-Islet from that school? I mean, so many people have now lost out on what they were getting from that school, all because of what you all have now done to force that school to leave St. Lucia. And now Antigua is saying they're not going to force them, they're not going to give them any deadlines for accreditation. Why is it St. Lucia couldn't work with these people to ensure that this school remains, seeing that so many people depend on them, not just the students. Maybe 1 or 2 St. Lucians go there, but 99% were not St. Lucians. So why do they need this CAM-HP accreditation when they're not going to stay here, they're not going to practice in St. Lucia or in the region? I think y'all erred big time. Y'all made a big faux pas, and people are going to pay for it because a lot of people depended on that school. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for calling.
And y'all need to stop blaming other people, but take the blame for it.
Thank you so much for calling, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. And I'm really happy for this conversation because that is a sentiment that continues to percolate out there without people understanding what we inherited. And that is why I know there's a lot of pressure on me to say exactly how ugly it was. It was ugly, period. Okay, put that aside. My responsibility, our responsibility is to fix it. And we are working with AMU, we are working with IAU, and we continue to work with Spartans to ensure that they maintain the standard that is required of them. You cannot play with the business of health. If you and I fall ill, or anybody, you want to be sure that the person attending to you is sufficiently trained. We've got to be careful. Let's not get emotional about it. Yes, we want the economic spin-off, and yes, we want all the wonderful business that comes along with it, and that is why I appreciate the technical advice that we get from our sister agency in the entity of the Medical and Dental Council. But having said that, we now recognize, is there a satisfactory fix that does not compromise a standard? That is the issue. Can we fix this without compromising standard? And I have every reason to believe that the medical schools that continue to operate in St. Lucia have every commitment to ensuring that they maintain the standards and meet the regulations as prescribed. And we continue to work with these who are interested in the business of education.
You have a call. Good evening.
Good evening. I am a student of St. Mary's College, and I just want to talk about the laptop controversy and stuff like that. Well, it's not a controversy, but the state of what's happening. And I just want to tell the minister, why did you guys give it to the Tapio children when the Form 3, Form 4, and Form 5 students, right now, they need their the laptops to do their CXCs because CXC is very, what's the word?
CXC is migrating to the e-testing modality, which means, Tim,
yes,
that over time...
but
are you finished?
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. Are you through?
No, I am not done.
Okay,
Okay, go
I
ahead.
beg your pardon.
I just wanted to know why y'all give it to the Tapio children instead of the children who needed to do their exams at this moment in time.
Sure.
Okay.
When the children could wait their turn.
Thank you so
I like
much.
that.
Okay.
So the caller is wondering why is it we gave Tapio six laptops versus equipping Forms 1, 2, 3 of the St. Mary's College. Of course, there's an obvious disparity in the number. I don't think one could easily put it down to that. But more importantly, I want to say it again. In reviewing what obtained, we realized, one, we had to put together a curriculum that would go along with the machine. And that is why in September we will be launching and introducing a digital literacy course. And that will go some distance in ensuring that the students can interact with the machine for productive and learning purposes.
How soon after that they will be receiving the laptops?
I must say that that component is being reviewed as well. Is it that we outfit each child with a laptop, or each school should have sufficient lab space to allow for each student, not just third formers, every student in that school? And also, given that we've assumed responsibility for the ICT access centers, can we not leverage the use of some of these if they are within close proximity of the school, as in the case of Miku, that then becomes in effect an extension of the school and can be timetabled for use for the teaching of IT-related courses?
We have a call. Good evening.
Hi, evening.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
Minister.
Hello, sir.
I've been following debate like you about accreditation. And interesting, the last caller, female caller, she mentioned that the schools had up to 2023, I think, or 2016.
Yes, in the first instance.
We all know accreditation is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But you mentioned something interesting in that a change it was. And the change came across in April 2017. Yes? Are you correct? Can you indicate what change was that came across in 2017?
That's a very good question. Are you done? Sorry.
Well, no, I'll follow up. I just want to clarify.
Beg your pardon?
I will follow up.
Oh, depending. Okay,
yeah.
sure. So I can answer now.
Sure.
Thank you. One can imagine any number of reasons for that adjustment. There is reason to believe that certain medical schools or graduates of medical schools and or staff of medical schools here in St. Lucia were communicating falsified information to those oversight agencies. And I think that is one of the reasons. The other thing is that we have reason to believe, too, that maybe there were reports of graduates of some of these schools not being sufficiently competent and therefore calling into question the rigidity or rigor of the programs on offer. There are also, and out there, some of it is in the public domain, schools or staff members or graduates in effect engaging in things that perhaps were dubbed to be non-kosher and not in the best interest of the service of delivering a bona fide medical program.
Thanks. So, Minister, just following up, given that I think you will agree that accreditation is a process.
Yes.
And it had a certain time to meet that process to be accredited. And it will certainly change on them. Would you say it's fair to blame indeed your government or any last government for them not being accredited as it stands? Because as you indicated, they had up to 20 years to do it, and it has changed, brought it forward in April 2017, which is quite recent.
So
can you indeed blame your government or indeed the last administration for them not being accredited?
I will hesitate to get into the blaming game because you'd be surprised the number of people who can get caught in that net, and agencies and personalities. That does little good for the lady who wrote to St. Lucia News Online, or the caller a while ago, or the graduates who I speak with either via email or in person. The blame game will not help. It was a royal mess.
The blame game from you, Minister. Because you said you inherited the mess.
And that's why we're fixing it, sir. I know. That's why we're fixing it. We're fixing it to the extent that we are holding the management of those schools partially responsible. We ought to hold to the agencies responsible for oversight responsible to some extent. To the extent that
a deadline. It's not their fault. The deadline was changed. But there was a deadline, and they were working towards the deadline.
And that is why there's so much sympathy on our part, and that is why we continue to work with the medical schools who are interested in delivering and offering a kosher, a bona fide medical program. And I want to say to the medical schools, to Spartans, to AMU, to IAU, we will continue to work very closely with you. We know that does little for your bottom line because there's a lot of misinformation out there. We want to say to you to continue to improve your product, to continue to market your product. St. Lucia remains a fertile, welcoming space for offshore medical schools and other tertiary institutions. We have gone way and beyond to negotiate timeframes, to renegotiate timeframes so that we shorten that 18-month window. But most importantly, I believe, Tim, what we need to do is to meet again with our partners and agencies so that we can put into effect that fix, which is to say that those students who have graduated and have passed the CAMC exam, whether or not they attended an accredited school, but they have proven themselves insofar as they can pass that exam, should be afforded the option of licensure in St. Lucia. That's why I'm appealing to my colleague.
Let's hear from the final caller finally. Hello? Okay, well, that's it. Okay. Let's take the final comments from you, Madam Minister.
I recognize that the education sector is very important. I regret the recent incidents regarding the medical schools. We remain committed as a government to ensuring that we work with the remaining medical schools here to restore their business because we appreciate that you have had some loss. We will do what is necessary to shorten the waiting time and ensure that you can go through the accreditation process more efficiently than what has obtained previously. But in the meantime, too, I continue to massage the agencies with which we work in the entities of the Ministry of Health and the Medical and Dental Council, such that we can give due consideration to exploring the option of allowing students who have written the CAMC exam and have proven themselves successful at that exam to be considered for licensure, whether or not they have attended a school that is fully accredited by CAMHP, because I'm sure we can all appreciate that these schools are in the process of securing accreditation, and I have said to them accreditation needs to remain an aspiration. I want to thank my staff. The last 14 months I've had the opportunity to work with some wonderful people in the Ministry of Education, Innovation, Gender Relations. We have to come back to talk about gender relations. We're doing some fantastic work there in terms of gender mainstreaming and in integrating gender mainstreaming in the education system, for example. And the Department of Sustainable Development, whose work speaks volumes and is well recognized as an entity regionally and internationally as well. And I want to thank all that you do. Thank you for all that you do, and to thank you for your tutelage. This has been a steep learning curve. I've had to learn lots of acronyms and technical terms, and that's good fun. But all with a view to building a new St. Lucia and ensuring that we can deliver on the mandate that the people have given to us and what is contained in the manifesto of the United Workers' Party. And I trust that we have the cooperation and collaboration and the talented persons within the public service to make this happen to the benefit of the people of St. Lucia.
Madam Minister, thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live.
Sweat moon.
And thank you so much for watching and listening and contributing via your calls. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked. That is one stupid chicken. Good night, everyone. My name is Timothy Polio. See you next time.